Hi guys, this is Joshua Peterson, Peterson Electric. We're here in Loveland, Colorado this morning on a service call. The complaint is that their pole light wasn't turning on. So if you can see this pole light right here in the yard next to this tree, and their pole light's over here, right there. The city takes care of these poles. They're like 5 foot tall. I typically come off of right here, this lug, and this is what the city does with the power company. I had to call them to get permission to cut the tag and open this can, and they fed it with just a normal fuse cartridge, like an S-type, the black and a white, and then they did a slow blow fuse, an S-type cartridge screw in. It's a smaller one, it's a 1 amp. Then they fed it over to here through to the photo eye, and then out down this conduit once the sun kicked on, the sun went down so the photo eye would kick on. The issue is that they kept blowing it. They'd blown that fuse 5 times, and I guarantee they blew it right away within a few minutes. So what I did is I tested it first. I took off that head over there. Let me see if I can show you here. I took that head off right there, and I put on a normal light, just with a normal, like a NEMA outdoor R-rated 3 socket. And I hooked it up, and then I hooked black to black on here, but I bypassed the photo eye and I bypassed their cartridge. And I looked out on this panel. I actually have a disconnect here, but I have a couple spaces for a breaker, so I put in a 15 amp GE, and I ran it straight out on the wire and bypassed the photo eye and took off their cartridge. And finally, within about 10 minutes, I finally popped that GE breaker. But what I also did is I took off all 3 wires on this side and all 3 wires on that side, and used my continuity meter, and I actually saw some resistance higher on the ground to hot than the neutral to hot. And again, when you're laying out a wire, it's a UF cable like this, that's a flat conductor 12-2. It's going to have hot, ground, neutral, or hot, ground, neutral. And I'm getting more resistance on the hot and ground. So then I hooked up my light bulb down there, and then basically kept the hot on the black the whole time, the ungrounded conductor on the pole over there. And then the neutral I decided to hook up to the ground. And I actually on my meter got 1.5 amps of resistance, but with a 60 watt bulb that's incandescent, I should only have a half amp if you do your pi formula. And then on the neutral I actually had about almost 1 amp, which is still high as well. So it's starting to show me that I have something going on. I think there's a splice issue down below, because this side over here has a UF cable that is going to be white. It used to be a gray color, but it fades. It's from the 90s. Well, on the other side, it's actually brown. So it shows me that I doubt it changed that much in color between the two, that there is a splice at the bottom of the pole by the cement. And usually people who don't really understand how to splice things use these yellow wire caps when they're dealing with things outside, and you can't do that. That resistance of that acidicness in the water, whether it's the cement or the ground seeping through the winter and spring, is just going to corrode those wire caps and make the resistance even higher. So again, as your resistance increases, because there's not a good connection, your amps are going to increase, and therefore that's why this is blowing. Well, they had a CFL bulb out there. It was a 14 watt brand new, and it should never even pop the breaker. It should be like maybe 0.25 amps at the most, a quarter amp. So anyways, this is actually showing me that when I did my meter, I checked for resistance. Then I checked and ran another bulb separate of their pole light so I didn't damage it, with a cheap bulb and a socket. And I checked my current and my voltage. And then at that point, I finally was able to bypass the photo eye. And I know the photo eye is working, but now I finally just threw this breaker. So I hooked it all up, covered up my photo eye here with a piece of 3M black tape. And then at that point, I threw the breaker. So I'm going to try this test again, and then I'll let you know what I found.